Video games are often full of choices, but more often than not, you're pulled on a linear path. Nothing wrong with directed storytelling, of course, but sometimes this leads to the game making you do something that you kind of feel awkward or gross about afterwards. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to be checking out games that kind of made you do some bad things. So, spoilers are ahead. Travel with care, but drop a like, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and we start off with Wolfenstein: The New Order. Now, the rebooted series started out incredibly strong with The New Order. In this reboot, he plays an American soldier from World War II who gets knocked into a coma and awakens in a world where Germany was successful. They took over the entire world. It's then up to you to work with a group of rebels to take the planet back piece by piece. It's honestly a phenomenal game, but what gets it on the list is a choice you have to make in the first level. The campaign starts during the last days of World War II. Your squad fights to take down the main villain's compound, but after being captured, you're then forced to choose which one of your two squad mates is going to make it out alive. There's no way out of this either. The game literally holds you down and forces you to look at the person that you choose. It's a really hard decision because all the characters in this game are super likable and very, very well written. Then, for the remainder of the game, whoever you didn't choose tags along with you and constantly reminds you of the fact that you let them live while sentencing their friend to a horrific demise. The New Order is an amazing game. It's one of the best World War II shooters ever made, if you ask me, but be ready for an emotional gut punch that you're going to endure right out of the gate. At number 9, GTA 5. Rockstar, they're one of the best storytelling developers out there. Now, GTA 5 may not be everybody's cup of tea, and it's not the first example, but it was impactful. Yes, some people prefer GTA 4 or Red Dead 2, but the three-way storytelling of GTA 5 was pretty awesome, and the gameplay fit the tone perfectly. Throughout the campaign, you're forced to do some things you may not really want to. Robberies, heists, and one particularly grueling torture sequence really test how far you're willing to go in this game. But since it's linear, you have no choice. No choice but to finish the job that Rockstar made you start. GTA 5 is a phenomenal game, and its sales records are certainly to be commended. But if you have a weak stomach, you may want to avoid this one. At number 8, Batman Arkham Knight. Yeah, the Arkham series laid the foundation for lots of superhero games to come, and many people still consider it to be the best comic book adaptation in video game history. So why would I put it on this list? Well, Batman is one of the most unbreakable superheroes of all time, so how could he be on a list of games that makes you do bad things? Well, for the same reason that Arkham Knight is rated M for mature instead of T for teen like the rest of the series. Arkham Knight gets very dark at times, and you can see Batman being pushed to his limit to the point that he starts doing things that Batman would never do. There's one sequence in Arkham Knight where you use the wheel of the Batmobile to torture information out of a thug. There's another sequence where you take control of the Joker and mindlessly just get rid of dozens of helpless enemies in the Bat Tank. Arkham Knight got a decent amount of criticism upon release for being a bit of a step down from the previous games, but I think it's a really good Batman game. The story was great, the open world's awesome, level design maybe on the safe side, but it was a worthy conclusion to the series. When do we get the next one? At number 7, Dark Souls. Probably not a game you expect on this list, but there's one thing everyone can appreciate about Dark Souls. It's the storytelling. The way From Software kind of wove the story into the world of Dark Souls was fascinating, and depending on who you were, you might actually think it belongs much higher on this list. The game starts out vague. You are the chosen undead, a warrior destined to essentially restart the universe in the direction of your choosing. So will you prolong the current world? Will you end the world, make a fresh start? Your decision at the end will likely depend on how much you were paying attention to the world as you progress through it and how closely you were paying attention. From a very simple perspective, Dark Souls is a game where you fight through hundreds of evil creatures and eventually stop their reign and create a new world without them. But from a different point of view, Dark Souls is a game where you rampage through a world, murder all its heroes simply because you enjoyed it. Depending on your point of view, the meaning of Dark Souls can vary wildly. And if you're on a certain side of that coin, you probably felt really bad about yourself once you finished the game, and that's why it's here today. You didn't notice all the horrible things you were doing in the moment, but once the narrative gets flipped on its head at the end and all the pieces fall into place, you can't help but look at your controller in silence. You feel guilty about everything you just did. More open-ended storytelling in video games, please. This was phenomenal. At number 6, Spider-Man 2018. Again, probably not the game you expected to see on this list, but I just finished replaying this game's story, and I have to say, when it came down to the end, I really did not want to fight Doc Ock. I didn't. Spider-Man takes the traditional Spider-Man narrative, lets you live out all your crazy wall-crawling fantasies, but it also does a really good job at showing why people love this character. The relationship between Peter and Doc It's perfect, and you really get to see how much of a father figure that Dr. Octavius is to our hero. But sadly, this also means we get a front row seat to Otto's descent into madness, and when the time finally comes to bring him down, it's pretty hard to watch, honestly, or go through. This version of Doc Ock is extremely sympathetic, and the relationship between him and Peter is so personal, it makes it almost impossible to just jump full speed into the final boss fight. Otto was a good man, twisted by power, twisted by revenge, but that didn't change the fact that he was like a father to Peter. Spider-Man 2018, excellent game. If you've never played it, you need to. I cannot wait to see what Spider-Man 2 has in store. At number 5, Manhunt 1 and Manhunt 2. I mentioned earlier that GTA 5 wasn't for those with a weak stomach, but I don't think that game even comes close to being Rockstar's most gut-wrenching game. The Manhunt series is one of the most controversial in gaming history because of the violence, but it can sometimes overshadow just how good the gameplay was and how interesting the story was. Manhunt 1 has you playing as a death row inmate forced to create films in order to win his freedom. Manhunt 2 has you playing as an amnesiac being manipulated by a mysterious partner trying to unravel the secrets and history of some weird cult. Both games are very interesting, and they genuinely make you sympathize with the characters, but that's obviously not going to erase the fact that you do some really messed up things in the progress. The methods you're forced to use throughout this game push the M rating to its limit, and both games are honestly worth playing, so you can just see how underrated they became due to the controversy surrounding them. Just know going in, you're going to have to do some really terrible things in order to see the end of it. At number 4, BioShock. I've been spoiling games left and right in this video, but since BioShock is getting a Netflix adaptation soon, there's a lot of people who haven't played it. I'm going to try to keep the spoilers to a minimum. This is a game where you play as a man who miraculously stumbles upon the remnants of an underwater utopia. You're guided through the horrors and the mysterious voice simply asking for your assistance. You learn more and more about the formation of the city, those who built it, until you reach the climax of the story in which everything gets turned on its head and you are more or less the villain. Again, I don't want to spoil it much, but I mean, even with the knowledge there's a twist, but one of the reasons BioShock exploded so much when it first came out was because of how impactful the story was. The way this game uses video games to its advantage and the story, it's incredible. I'm hoping we get a remake or a continuation in the near future. BioShock 1 is a masterpiece, but that twist near the end might make you feel pretty bad about yourself. At number 3, and I've played through this fully, Spec Ops: The Line. Speaking about feeling bad about yourself, that's basically the whole point of this game. It's a third-person shooter with a modern military setting, which many people used as a reason to write it off. I mean, it was released during the golden age of both COD and Battlefield, so it was hard to be interested in a new modern military shooter, especially one with a generic title called Spec Ops. But playing through the game is an extremely emotional experience, and by the end of it, you feel like you need to take a shower. Seriously. This is a game deliberately designed to make you feel bad about things you're doing, and it does it. When you think about it, modern military games are kind of messed up because you're turning this very real, very horrific thing into a piece of escapist fantasy. Now, obviously, there's nothing wrong with liking military shooters, but it's something we all kind of ignore for the sake of the fun factor. Spec Ops, on the other hand, doesn't shy away from the horrors of war and the mistakes that soldiers will inevitably make when desensitized to the violence around them. Some of the things this game makes you do are gut-wrenching. It wasn't a huge commercial success, but it did garner a bit of a cult following. At number 2, who's ready for The Last of Us on HBO? The Last of Us. It's one of the most acclaimed video games of all time. Whether or not you think it's overrated doesn't matter. Released in 2013, you played as Joel, a man escorting a young girl, Ellie, across the United States in hopes to get a cure for a zombie virus that ravaged the country and left most of humanity in shambles. Along the way, you'll have to brutally get rid of people. It's just for the sake of your own journey. But the way it's presented has this unique way of making you feel bad. The people you're getting rid of, just like you, they're just trying to make their way in this brutal world again, just like you. Dark, violent, end of the story forces you to do something you may not want to do. If you've played it, you already know. The Last of Us is a masterpiece of video game presentation and storytelling. For what I've heard, the HBO series is like exactly what it was. It's going to be great. And at number 1, The Last of Us 2. Now, the first game was almost universally acclaimed. The sequel, not so much. Instead of telling a dark but optimistic story, Part 2 doubles down on the darkness and frequently puts the player in really hard situations to the point that it's almost exhausting to get through. Again, the people you're getting rid of are mostly survivors, simply trying to make their way in this messed up world you share. In the dual perspective storytelling of Part 2, hammers home that your heroes may not be the people you think they are. The game also ends on a painfully depressing note, which basically punches you in the face 2 or 3 times. For doing what it told you to do, even though you didn't want to. The Last of Us 2 is controversial, to say the least, because it's in-your-face messaging about the cycle of violence, and while its gameplay may be top-notch to fans of stealth shooters, the amount of messed up things you have to do in order to progress it's going to weigh on you. To me, the first game is far superior, but if we're talking about games that made you feel bad for doing things, part 2 takes the cake without question. And there you have it. Let me know one game that made you do things you didn't want to do, and I'll see you soon.